Welcome to the How Did They Do It Real Estate Podcast. Have you ever wondered how people succeed in real estate and what steps they took to get there? If so, this podcast is for you. Your hosts, Sayla and Eileen Prack, interview top experts in the real estate community to share with you their real estate journey and how they achieved massive success. Our goal is to provide you with valuable real estate resources and to help you apply it to your own real estate goal. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the How Did They Do It Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Prack. And today our guest is Jonas Bordo, and he is the CEO of Dwellsy, and he's here to bring you the best tips for listing a rental apartment. And he's created Dwellsy, the largest online marketplace for rentals, and he's here to demystify the process and provide real-world tips. So Jonas, thank you so much for being here on the show today, and welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Eileen. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So Jonas, can you share a little bit more about your background, how you got started with real estate, and, a little bit of a top overview of Dwellsy and what that platform looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in and around the real estate space for about 20 years in different guises. So I've worked in the real estate investment management space. I was with what was then Bentall Kennedy, is now Bentall Green Oak, helping run an organization that managed about 40 billion in assets under management across all of the major asset classes in real estate. I've been an individual owner and operator of residential real estate, built up to a massive 8 units myself in Chicago at one point. And I operated a 60,000 unit portfolio for Essex Property Trust, which is a multifamily REIT. And about 3 years ago, I co-founded Dwellsy, which is meant to build for the first time a truly functional marketplace for rental housing in the United States. So really creating a liquid market where renters can find rental properties and landlords can find renters to get their properties filled, and do so in a way that is completely free and super easy for everybody involved.
Throughout your time being in real estate, why did you decide that, Dwellsy was something that was needed in this marketplace? And what kind of need were you trying to fulfill as you were building it up and looking for who you wanted to serve?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I'm really driven, Eileen, by solving problems. And the bigger, thornier the problem, the more I obsess over it. And when I was at Essex, I actually watched the collapse of Craigslist in this space. The time when I took the job at Essex, Craigslist was our primary source of leads. That's where we're getting most of our lead volume. And frankly, our highest quality lead volume was coming from Craigslist. And this is across a 60,000 unit portfolio of Class A, Class B properties up and down the West Coast. And we watched it go from 30, 40, 50, 60% of our leads down to almost zero. And so that was the pain and agony from the landlord side, trying to figure out how to backfill that lead volume and find other alternatives. But then I was also out talking to prospective renters, prospective residents for our properties, and hearing from them firsthand just how hard the search had become in the absence of a platform like Craigslist. That, you can say what you will about Craigslist and how unpleasant and how painful it was at the time, but at least most of the inventory was there. And there was nothing else like it in the market. So renters were finding themselves having to go out and walk neighborhoods, look for yard signs. There really was no good alternative that had more than 10% of the inventory. There's nothing out there that had it. So the opportunity to actually create a functional market in a post-Craigslist world just appealed to me as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I jumped on it.
What do you think about, because a lot of people, since you mentioned, a lot of people were using Craigslist to post and to find different places to live. What was it about it that changed the environment, that made it not as a welcoming or a preferred place to find a residence?
Yeah, I think two things happened. I think one was the kind of natural progression and growth of fraud on the platform. Craigslist is a near perfect incubator for fraud in this space. You've got a combination of a bunch of different factors combining. You've got large dollar transactions between strangers under pressure, time pressure in particular, but also emotional pressure as renters are trying to figure out the right place for them and their families. And they have very little time often. They need to act now in order to secure the place because they've been looking for a while and it's hard to find that right place. And when you find it, you got to move fast. And in some cases, moving fast means sending your entire life savings to a complete stranger. And we had a couple of things happen the late 2010s, which was the advent of systems like Zelle and Venmo that created transfer mechanisms that could not be reversed. And the fraudsters fell on those as a new opportunity to expand their fraud activities. And Craigslist went from having a significant amount of fraud. It had always had a significant amount of fraud on there. There's very little fraud defenses on Craigslist to being mostly fraud. But the thing that really did them in, the second thing that did them in, was this new form of fraud on Craigslist, which is a fake renter scam. That scam I just outlined was the fake landlord scam, where somebody's posing as a landlord and trying to steal from renters. The thing that really did them in was the fake renter scam, where somebody poses as a renter and says, I'm going to pay you a year's rent up front. Oh, you know what? I just need a little help with my moving expenses. Could you send me $1,000? And as soon as I get that, I'll wire you the full year's rent. It sounds implausible, but I've talked to people who've been taken in by that scam, and almost universally, they were in a tough spot for whatever reason. And it just sounded like it was going to save them from something. And it was much needed in that moment. And they got taken in. And that was the thing that really forced the small owners and operators of, there's north of 10 million individual landlords in this country. And that forced them off Craigslist. And when that inventory went away, Craigslist really ceased to be a useful tool for renters and landlords when those folks got off. At that point, it went from being, maybe 50%. I have no idea what the actual percentage was at that time. Back in the heyday of Craigslist, maybe it was half scammers and half real transactions. Now it's overwhelmingly scammers, 80-90% scams on there.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize. I knew that the one way where people were scamming potential renters, but I'd never heard about the ones where it was the other way around. So that's an interesting, that's a new one that I've heard of.
Yeah. I talk to people almost every week who've had that experience. I talked to a gentleman last week who I feel like I hear this almost exactly the same story every couple of weeks. It's always about a capital need, and it's often a roof. Somebody has to put a new roof on. And as you know, a roof is a very expensive thing to do. So you have to come up with $20,000, $30,000 to put a new roof on a property. And you don't always have as much capital reserves as you might want as an owner of a property. And so you've got to come up with that money. And you've got to lease the property out. So you're dealing with vacancy at the same time. As we all know, vacancy is a very expensive thing for a property owner, and a new roof is a very expensive thing. You're dealing with those two things at once, and you're already capital constrained. And somebody says, I can pay you the whole year's rent up front. And it sounds like it's going to fix all your problems all at once, right? And you wire that person $1,000 to solve a short-term problem that they have, and then you never hear from them again. And that, I've talked to dozens of people, unfortunately, who've been taken in by that. And, people who are just humiliated and embarrassed that it happened to them, people who you wouldn't have expected to have that happen to them. Folks, frankly, like you or I, could happen to anyone in the right moment.
So because now this rental and landlord environment has a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth, and there's a lot of questions around, trust and being confident in renting through a platform that you feel secure with, that you're not going to get scammed, that it's a legitimate business, that people are who they say they are going to be, and you're finding good quality, not just renters, but also landlords as well, to be able to partner together with, find a good home, find somebody to take good care of your properties. As you were building up and starting out, how did you take those first couple of steps to kind of break down that barrier again, build up that trust within the market, and then establish yourself as a place where, it's some place where you can trust it. It's a place where, both tenants and landlords can go in and utilize this marketplace for what it's supposed to be?
That's the question, and really the whole ballgame, right? Because in a market like this that has been so scarred by trust issues, we knew we had to address that from minute one, and we did. So, building right from the first foundational moment, we put trust and security first. So building with Dwellsy Verified right from the beginning, and verifying market participants right out of the gate. We have 3 different levels of verification on our site. There's the Dwellsy Verified, which are the highest level of verification on our site. That's the property managers that we verified through and through. There's never been a loss that we know of on the Dwellsy site with Dwellsy Verified folks. There's Dwellsy Unverified, where we are 99% sure that those listings are genuine and legitimate. And then there's a cohort that never appear on the site. And frankly, it's a significant cohort. And we've drawn a very hard line. And we've said, fraud zero is our goal. Buyer beware is not good enough in this category. Buyer beware has been the default of every site out there has been saying for years in the space, you, the buyer, need to take care. And that's not good enough. The marketplace, Dwellsy in our case, has a responsibility, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So we take a ton of action to keep our marketplace safe and have done from the beginning. And that started with putting fraud and fraud elimination front and center from minute one, and making sure that, amongst other things, we are a true name platform. We ask that people transact in their real names, and that if you want to transact anonymously, you don't get to do that on our platform. It's just one of many, many fraud defenses that we have on Dwellsy.
How are you partnering also with landlords to be able to put their listings and their properties onto your platform so renters can find it? And then also, how are renters finding your platform and utilizing it?
Yeah, with the landlords, we've worked to meet them where they are. So if you're a landlord utilizing property management software, in most cases, you can just click the button with your property management software and list with Dwellsy. With one of the old-fashioned pay-to-play ILSs, you click the button and you get a call from their sales rep. You click the button for Dwellsy and it just goes through and the listings start appearing on Dwellsy. In some cases, like with our friends at Appfolio, your listings just appear on Dwellsy. So that's made it really easy. For folks who are not using property management software, we have a direct listing process called Dwellsy Direct. And you can just list directly on our website through a secure process. So we've tried to embrace whatever process the landlord would like to use and make it as easy as possible, with the caveat that you do have to go through a verification process. It took us 2 years to develop the process to secure for landlords to go through that process. And it is a little bit something to get used to, because we are actually verifying the landlord is a real human being and that they are a verifiable person, and there's no anonymity allowed. So it's a little bit different than what some folks are used to, but we think it provides a very high degree of security, which in the long run is going to benefit everybody involved. So that's on the landlord side. And how are renters finding us? A wide variety of different ways. Shared listings across the web. Renters are finding us through SEO and, just searching addresses and coming up with Dwellsy. Increasingly, we're coming up higher and higher in the search rankings every day. We are buying search traffic through paid search and paid social and other activities like that. We're advertising the Dwellsy brand more and more every day. So that is growing significantly. We've grown over 30% per month, each month over the last 15 months, which is a pretty blistering pace of consumer acquisition and growth. It's been a lot to keep up with, but it's been pretty exciting.
So once you're on the platform and let's say a renter finds your property as a landlord and they, decide to want to move forward and proceed with it, what happens afterwards?
Yeah, so I've been a landlord myself in a lot of different ways, and I know how hard landlords work to develop their process and how important that process is to them, to their own comfort and their own management of their enterprise. And we believe that they should be able to run their business the way they want to run their business. So our job is to make the introduction between the landlord and the prospective renter. So we make that introduction, then it's up to the landlord to follow up with that renter as they see fit. Dwellsy leads are the highest quality leads in the business. We work very hard, and there's a bunch of things that are unique about how Dwellsy approaches lead generation to make sure that our leads are high quality. So we're not wasting anybody's time. We think every Dwellsy lead is worth following up on. And so from there, it's up to the landlord to follow up with that renter and then, work to secure their next tenant for their place.
Are there specific markets that Dwellsy targets or are essentially located in specific markets, or are you expanding nationwide? How does that marketplace look like in terms of location?
Yeah, it's so funny because my hypothesis going into this was that we were going to have to start off regionally, and we picked a few target markets initially, and the demand out of the gate was so extraordinary. People are just so frustrated with the status quo in this space. Aileen, we're up to over 13 million units listing with us today, which means we have more inventory than any other rental platform in pretty much every market in the country. So we are everywhere at this point, everywhere across the United States. So any market that anyone wants to list with us, we're a great listing service in every city in the country. We track over 440 metro areas where we have meaningful rental data. And any one of those markets works for us.
As you've been growing it and building it up, creating this type of platform, creating the technology that goes behind it, it's definitely quite a bit of work that goes in and gets involved in there. Yeah. So for you, what was the most painful point or the biggest challenge that you had to overcome as you've been building up, spreading the word, marketing, getting users on? What was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
Serving up the experience for the renter, where we are literally delivering billions of data points that the renter can select from within seconds, within, frankly, milliseconds, such that they can start on our homepage, zoom into any market they wanted in the country. Within a handful of seconds, they can be looking at individual listings in detail and quality without error. That requires some seriously elegant code. It's not putting people on the moon or inventing something that's never existed before, but to do so with a lean and efficient team at scale. Nobody's ever had this many listings before. And certainly nobody's ever had this many listings after just 3 years of operations. I'm really proud of the work the team's done to do that.
So I think we talked a little bit about it earlier too, because it's not the users on Dwellsy, they're not just geared towards someone who has multiple doors or like giant apartments or anything like that, but even the individual investors who have one or two, units underneath their doors that they want to list out or utilize a platform. Anybody can go on to this platform and be able to list it, find a quality and qualified tenant to be able to match with, and then potentially list it out with on the platform.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're starting from a fundamentally different starting point and construct. Setting aside Craigslist, which is a little bit different, every other listing service that's ever existed before, the landlord is the client and the renter is the product that's being delivered to the landlord. For us, the landlord, the property manager, is our partner, and the renter is the customer that we're seeking to serve. And that renter is out there trying to decide between a single family home where they might get a roommate, or a 1-bedroom apartment that's closer to their office, or a walk-up, somewhere that might be closer to outdoor areas where they might want to spend their weekends, right? They are deciding between a wide variety of different types of assets and lifestyle choices. And right now, there's nothing that serves that except for Dwellsy. And there's no landlord that owns all of those types of assets. In my, past life, I've been a landlord in a lot of different types of situations. I've been a renter in a lot of different types of situations. So I've lived both sides of that. And I can tell you, running 60,000 units at Essex, if you wanted a large multifamily experience, we could help you with that. But I talked to a lot of renters who were deciding between that or a single family home. And I'd say, well, good luck with the single family homes. We can't help you there. And they say, well, do you know where I can look for something like that? I say, yeesh, go to the neighborhood you want and go walk around and, look for yard signs, because that was really the best option that was available at the time. So we're trying to really serve that renter and help them look at all the options that are available to them. And what that means is if you're a landlord, there's one listing site, regardless of what kind of place you have, where you can list all of your units in one place. That also means we are a data source also for landlords who are trying to figure out pricing, who are trying to figure out, what a great listing looks like, regardless of your asset style. We can help in all those different fronts.
So I think that you would be a great person to ask this question too, because you've seen so many different trends. There are so many users and renters and landlords on your space. How have you seen the market within the renter side of things? And has that changed over time? Has there been a larger influx of renters getting into real estate? And has that size population grown since you've started?
Yeah, we have, there's been so many changes, and frankly, COVID has dramatically changed the nature of demand for housing in so many different ways. It'll be really interesting to see how that unfolds over time and whether some of these demand changes are long-term durable or not. I kind of break out the market into 3 different groups. There's premium multifamily. And so if you're looking at that kind of unit, that Class A, newer, large buildings or large communities, that type of property, generally speaking, not always the case, but generally speaking, saw some pretty tough downturns in rents and now has climbed back very materially. And a lot of the price increases that we've seen that have got a lot of press in that category have come from that asset class. More workforce housing, middle income, rental apartments, small format, your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 unit buildings where your more average rents are. That's been a very stable asset class, very stable level of demand. If anything, folks have traded out of that asset class and renters have been less interested in that asset class. The really hot stuff is the single family homes. That's what every renter in the country wants right now. We've been tracking rents and we're seeing north of 35% rent increases over the past year for single family homes, whereas across all apartments, we're seeing about 3.5% rent increases. The bifurcation between rental homes and rental apartments is staggering. Rental homes, the demand is out of control. Rental apartments, much more imbalance. Depends a lot on where you are. The picture from downtown San Francisco is wildly different than if you're sitting in Toledo, Ohio, for example, right? Very, very different in Orange County than in Cincinnati. There's lots of individual, real estate's always a local business. So lots of individual experiences that are very important to that. But as I said at the beginning, it'll be really interesting to see how those preferences change over time. Will everybody hold on to their pandemic pets that lead them all to want a backyard? Will we continue to work from home in huge numbers, or will we all go back to the office? Because if you're working from home, you need that second bedroom, that third bedroom, which means a single family home in many cases. As I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, there's not a lot of 3 and 4 bedroom apartments out there. If you want that space, you really need a single family home. So it'll be really interesting to see how durable these trends are in time.
So in your opinion, do you think that the trend is going to continue that way, or do you think that it will continuously shift and it's kind of in flux right now and things might shake out a little bit differently?
I don't see anything to suggest that it's going to change in the near term. In the next 12 months, I see demographics and household formation still favoring rentals. There are more rental housing households forming than owned households. That's a significant trend. The demand for single family homes is still outstripping all other asset classes by a significant degree. We have seen a return to the cities. So, the younger renters have returned to city centers after abandoning, downtown San Francisco and New York and, places like that. There has been a return, which has helped prices come back to levels they were at a couple of years ago. But, we aren't seeing as much demand for some of those offices. And, I'm still seeing a lot of companies saying, you don't have to come back to work quite yet. You can work from home, maybe forever in a lot of cases. I think a lot of people are wrestling, a lot of organizations are wrestling with, if I bring people back, are they going to quit? And do I want to deal with that?
Yeah. And there's a lot of competition out there because in today's environment, especially, the employees are trying to figure out what's best for them. And if they're not getting it with their current employers, they have options at this point. And so it's the employers are really competing now at this point, it seems like, to retain their good employees that they want to keep on and be competitive in the marketplace.
Well, and I have to say, it's not the same for every job. There are certainly some jobs where you really do have to be in person and where it really does make a difference. But I think if anything, the last couple of years have taught us we can be highly productive working remotely, and in many cases, even more productive than working in an office. All of the distractions of office life, the heavy commute, the wasted time, the childcare trade-offs, all of those things go away when you can work from home. And I think it really does free up a lot of people. I know, a lot of my folks who work at other companies who I talk to who do have offices and are struggling with recruiting. I know recruiting has been fairly straightforward for us because we're fully remote, and people, who work for Dwellsy can work anywhere they want. We really don't care. And that has made recruiting dramatically easier for us. And there's no discussion. I keep getting asked by prospective employees, are you going to ask me to return to an office? No, never. Okay, that's great. That's what they wanted to hear. Not like, well, maybe someday. That's the death knell. Nobody wants hybrid. Nobody wants, to be told they'll have to be somewhere maybe 2 days at some point in the future. They want to know they can work from anywhere and have that embraced. It really matters.
And it's so interesting that because you said, these past couple of years, and it's so interesting and so crazy to think about, like just a couple of years ago, we were in this pandemic lockdown type of environment, and how the market has shifted, how everybody's thinking has a little bit shifted a little bit. The marketplace within real estate has shifted in just a short period of time. Really, it's only been like a little over 2 years, right? At this point.
Yeah.
So
changes dramatic. Yeah. So dramatic. Yes. When you think about, the shift from primary cities, coastal cities to secondary cities, and how that's unfolded too, what's happening as people think about, once you don't have to live in Silicon Valley to work for Facebook anymore, and you can earn a Facebook salary living in Boise or living in, wherever you want to live. Wow, so much changes about how our society works. You think about all the follow-on effects of that kind of change. It really is enormous. It's societal change writ large.
So Jonas, what are you the most excited about in the near future?
We have just extraordinary growth going on here. And it is so much fun to see just more and more renters using Dwellsy every day, more and more landlords using Dwellsy every day. We've got north of a quarter of the rental units on our platform. To the best of my knowledge, nobody's ever had that before, except maybe for Craigslist. And just seeing that liquid market form, I'm a total nerd. I really, I'm an economist by training and a nerd by who I am. And it's just fun to watch that come together and watch new people join the team every couple of days. And just this growth is so much fun to experience, and just to be in the center of this thing that's happening that's going to change the way we all experience the rental market. It's fun to be at the center of that.
How has real estate impacted your life?
I grew up in it. It's shaped most of my adult life. I was in a family growing up where, the family was in real estate business growing up. So it was something that was around me at that point. So, it gave me the entrepreneurial bug as I grew up, and, had me thinking about investing in, 3 flats in Chicago right after I was out of school, and then an adult career almost entirely in the real estate business. So fair to say real estate has shaped most of my life to date in one way or another. But it really has shaped a lot about my thinking and how I work, and certainly what I do each day.
And if there's one thing that you know now about real estate that you wish you knew when you first started, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. That's a really good question. I wish I'd prepared an answer to that one. One thing I knew about it, you should reserve for capital expenses. I remember the scariest moment I ever had in my real estate investing journey was when I was under reserved at a point early in my career. And I went into it and was over leveraged. And it was some scary moments back in the 2008 downturn.
It's good to be prepared for things, unforeseen events.
Things do go wrong. Yes.
And what is one thing that sets the successful people apart in real estate investing?
I think you got to know your numbers. It is fundamentally a numbers game. And I think people who really do their homework and know their numbers, that makes the difference in the end.
Awesome. Well, Jonas, if our listeners out there are also interested in learning about you, Dwellsy, what you're doing, where's the best place that they can go?
They can always check out Dwellsy, just dwellsy.com, or they can feel free to email me. I'm at jonas@dwellsy.com. Always happy to chat.
Awesome. Fantastic, Jonas. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's incredible to see what you've been able to build in the short couple of years. And it's exciting to see where it will continue to grow from here, and how you are going to continue to expand, build up the business, build up the marketplace, share your resource with other people in the space. So I'm so appreciative of you taking your time out here today to share a little bit about your journey and what you've been doing in this space with us today.
It's absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you for listening to our podcast today, brought to you by Bonavest Capital. We would really appreciate it if you can go to iTunes right now and leave a rating and written review. Also, please don't forget to subscribe so you can always get the latest episodes. You can also connect with us on Facebook, How Did They Do It Real Estate. We'd love to hear your feedback and any topics that you're interested in for future episodes. Lastly, to learn more about us, you can go to bonavestcapital.com and fill out the Contact Us page so you can speak to us directly. Nothing on the show should be considered as specific personal advice. Please consult your legal, tax, and real estate professionals for individualized advice.